suggest that instead of operating the free trade zones as free trade zones, you operate them as free industry zones. So some of the constraints that are imposed on manufacturers in the free zone though can be, if you like, harmonized with the industrialization policy. What do you think about that? Obviously, apart from the infrastructure constraint, I feel that part of what is impeding progress with the pre-trade zone policy is this perception that it does not provide sufficient incentive to industries, especially at higher levels. Thank you.
Okay, I'll quickly address that. A bit of it is perception, a bit of it is reality. The truth is, just like I mentioned, a lot of reforms are happening now, and we're actually moving away from the concept of free trade zone. Very shortly, the Honorable Minister mentioned it, the name of the agency itself is being changed to Nigeria Industrial Development and Zones Agency. What used to happen is we're doing one cap fits all. The same incentive for a $100,000 business and the same incentive for a $5 billion business. It doesn't make any sense. So we've changed it now to make it more punitive to operate as a zone, free zone, meaning you bring in $100,000, your incentives will be limited to the $100,000. It goes without saying. Because you are taking higher risk, you're bringing in $5 billion, we have to look at your cost of funds and your what have you, so you are getting more incentives. So what we're doing now is moving from free zone to what we call industrial cities, industrial parks, and industrial clusters. The cluster, we make sure you have economies of scale in order in power, just like you are trying to do. I'm happy you raised this question because I had to do a presentation to your team before you accepted to come to Lekki. So yeah, it was a very tortuous whatever. I became a lawyer overnight, but it's all good. So we're moving towards that now. And even the NEPSA law is being changed. It's gone through the second reading in the National Assembly now. So all those features that are peculiar to encouraging manufacturing. In fact, the Honorable Minister didn't mention this. The agency that has been designated by the government now, Federal Government of Nigeria, to push NIRP is in NITSA. That's the old NEPSA. So a lot of things are going on. So you are very correct. We are not going to do one cap fits all. And we are more stringent now in terms of people who come into the space. If you recollect, I've only been on this job for about 1 year plus. 2 years before I joined, the president stopped approving licenses because it wasn't comfortable. Then the measurement of success in NEPSA was how many free trade zones you. I actually want to shut down a lot. And some are temporarily suspended now. If I have 5 that are working, I'm fine with it. I want to be able to say, just like in Dubai, 25% of their GDP comes from their free zone. I want to say 30% of the GDP comes from manufacturing and 30% of that GDP resides in my free zone. So that's the kind of things we're doing now. We're doing a lot of reforms, a whole lot of reforms.
Okay. Anybody else from the floor? I have a question over here, left-hand side from Mike.
My name is Fincho Daniels. I work at the Devanes Marine Consulting. 2 years ago, I did a research on Nigerian port policy, that the successful reform policy. But there is some issue that's been addressed already on custom clearance, 24 hours custom clearance. But according to my research on the conclusion of this thing is that there is a lot of issue on the custom clearance when I did my research 2 years ago. So my issue is that within you're talking about the IT base, 24 hours cargo clearance. But have you considered the issue of power as well too? We're talking about the trade facilitation. You have to consider about the power, because if the power is not consistent, how do you want to facilitate? How do you want to facilitate trade successfully and efficient and effective? That's the question.
Prince? Question for the next panel, I mean, okay. We will raise that at the next panel if you don't mind. Okay. Yeah? Okay. You don't want to talk to that one?
I just want to let him know that many people look at port operations as limited to what customs have done, what the freight forwarders are doing, what custom brokers are doing. But you know that the state of infrastructure in the ports in Nigeria today have decayed, tremendously. But I think government is working on how to make the roads work. Because sometimes you carry trailer load of cargo and it falls by the gate of the port, and if it's not delivered, it's not yet delivered. Talking about energy, some of the terminal operators are, providing power by themselves, and it's helping. And on the issue of IT, the operators under the Ministry of Transport are the one that is still lagging behind, because they also still need one-stop shop for you to pay shipping company, terminal operators, etc. Those one can cause delay. But a professional custom broker could be able to anticipate ahead of arrival of cargo. That is what PI is all about. Clear up all these issues and take delivery of your cargo in good time.
Okay.
Let me also add something there. What used to happen in Nigeria prior to this administration has been people develop policies at different levels. Agric, Minister of Agric will develop policy, trade will develop, that are not synchronized. What happens now is, I know before you get any document that affects 2 or 3 departments, before you get an approval from the president, he runs it through all the various ministers for their input. Now, I'll give an example. We keep talking about the Cade Road and what have you. Now, some of those trailers that are on the road need to be moved off the road. They need to go by rail. Now, nobody ever thought about making before that all the terminal points on a rail station, some of them should actually stop at free trade zones. Now, that is being done now. You have terminal points that are now, you make sure they are actually stopped at free, so that you reduce the number of trailers on the road. Now, the same thing with airports. We are beginning to have cargo ports now, and we are beginning to license, give some enterprises free zone licenses. So I think altogether now we're trying to do it. I'll give you another example. The minister mentioned the first gas industrial park. How did this come to be? The NNPC came up with a gas policy. All they wanted to do was just to sell gas. A fantastic policy that was signed, but they just wanted to sell gas. Now, who are you going to sell this gas to? You need to sell it to the industries. What will make industries leave Lagos, leave Ikeja, and go to Ogidigbe, somewhere in the creeks? You have to add some incentives. So NNPC knew at that point that they needed to be joined on the hip with NEPSA, because how we give the incentives. So the Narajunas of this world, fertilizer companies of this world are coming now because I'm giving them incentives. So before, we will set up a gas pack, everybody goes to sleep. Then we start thinking of what we use the gas for. In another 10 years, the place gets decayed. That's not how it's working now. So there's a gas revolution plant off-taker, there's an industry, I provide incentives, there's a port there. So we're all working together. Okay. So that's how things are changing now. It's not one cap fits all. We all work together and synchronize things.
Yes, when these
People in Citibank. But guess what? I didn't get a satisfaction. I went to a bank that was already formed. I wasn't part of the build-up. So I left and I went back home. Now, not only did I go back home, if I can leave my comfort of being an executive director of a big bank in Nigeria to join government, it means I want to be part of the change. I also want to use my skills from the private sector and try and do some reforms. The gentleman in NAFDAC built on something that a lady did. She came from the academic, and so you have to come home. You have to do it. I like the passion. Unfortunately, it's negative, but you can turn it to positive. Look at this as opportunities. If I can go into government, any other person can do it. And let's stop saying this government is bad, this government is bad. Be part of it and make your own change. If you fix one parastatal you started, then our kids will be better off. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I'm sorry, we're going to have to, we're over time, out of time. We can come back to these in some of the subsequent questions.